Hi, my name's Chris Cannons and welcome to OhCar. Today we're going to be doing a Resonator delete on my C55 AMG. Now yesterday we got it up on the ramps and pulled the section of exhaust out that contains the Resonator. I didn't get much footage of that. I got footage of going up on the ramp and stuff, but it's not very interesting and it's very specific to the car. The only piece of advice I have is that there's, on all cars, I'll just pull some out of the boot because I have some spares, but on all cars there's rubber exhaust hangers and they're very difficult to get off if you don't do it right. So I'll just show you what they look like. These ones are kind of covered in some like manufacturing residue because they're brand new, but they normally don't look like they're covered in mud. So they look like this. I'm sure if you've ever worked on a car or been under a car, you've seen this before. They're just like rubber hangers that the exhaust hangs onto so that the exhaust can move around and expand and contract while you're driving as it gets hot and cold, or as you corner and the exhaust pulls one way or the other. So my big tip with these, which I've never actually seen this tip online and I have discovered myself, is get yourself a heat gun or a hairdryer. A heat gun on low or a hairdryer on high. They're basically the same thing, a heat gun and a hairdryer. It's just that one gets much hotter. And heat these up before you try and pull them off. So in all honesty, I took off one of them yesterday without a heat gun and it took half an hour of yanking, and I got some penetrant in there, so some inox, WD-40 sort of thing, and it made very little difference. It was just impossible. These are really hard rubber and they're really hard to get on and off. So my biggest piece of advice with these is heat them up with a hairdryer or a heat gun. I got them off in about 5 minutes instead of half an hour for each one. So that's an absolutely massive difference. Anyway, so what we're doing is we're deleting a resonator. So if you don't know what a resonator is, it's a part of the exhaust where manufacturers want your exhaust when you're kind of around town and when you're idling, when you start your car in the morning, they want it to be fairly quiet. So at those low RPMs, a resonator is basically a straight through piece of pipe that has some baffles around the outside. So when the exhaust gases are going slow, they can get caught up in the baffles and a bunch of the sound sort of dissipates within the surrounding baffles. Sometimes there's a bit of mesh or something in there just to quieten the exhaust at those low RPMs. But the manufacturers want you to hear the sound of your exhaust, especially on a performance car like this. So when you're out on the highway, you're going onto an on-ramp, or you're just really on it in the canyons and you're at high RPMs, you can still fully hear the sound of your exhaust. I'm just going to quickly close the boot. So they put in resonators. Now, I got a V8 and I want to hear my V8 when I start it up, when I idle it. I don't want to have that restriction because it's a performance car and I want to hear it. So I'm going to be replacing the resonator, which is down there. I don't want to pick it up right now because it's got a muffler and stuff attached, but you will see that resonator when we get the shots of cutting it out. But what we're going to do is we're going to replace it with this piece of straight stainless steel metal tubing. It's a stainless steel exhaust, so we're putting a stainless steel piece in. Initially, I was going to just cut the resonator out and then slip fit an exhaust. Now, slip fitting is where you get a piece of steel or just tubing that is slightly larger than the other piece of tubing. So I would have gotten, I think it's about 3 inches at the start of the resonator. So I would have gotten like a 3 1/4 inch piece of exhaust tubing. And then I would have expanded that actual factory tubing so that the bigger tubing slotted onto it basically perfectly, and then I'd get an exhaust clamp and clamp it down so it stayed nice and tight. However, I spoke to a metalworker friend of mine and he said that'll work fine, but you'll actually have a better time just welding it. Now, I've not done much welding, but he has made it very clear to me that welding stainless with argon isn't actually much harder than welding steel, so we'll see how we go. I also have exhaust clamps just in case we need to do something, but we should be okay. Within that, with the initial plan, I bought an exhaust expander set. So this is pretty straightforward. As you twist this, it's hard to see, but this is getting bigger. So you put this in the end of your tubing, boop, you twist it out with an impact driver, and it expands, you know, that section of the exhaust. So that's really good for slip fitting, and it's also going to be handy for us today, just to match the sizes up a bit. We're not going to butt weld. We will expand the exhaust just enough to kind of slip over or slip inside. So there's just a little bit of overlap between the exhaust and the tubing. So we're sort of slip fitting, and we're also sort of welding. I also, just in case we completely fail, I bought some high temp silicone gasket maker. So if we get a few tacks on and we just completely fail, we can slather it in gasket maker, and then I can take it to a metal worker and get someone who actually knows what they're doing to do it. So in terms of tools, it's socket set, penetrant, hairdryer, gasket maker, exhaust expander, the actual exhaust itself, a welder with stainless steel wire and some argon gas, and then also for accuracy of everything, because measure 15 times, cut or weld once. So we just have a set of digital calipers to measure everything up and get it as accurate as possible. Luckily for us, the resonator on this particular car is in a dead straight section of exhaust, so we just have to make the section the right length and dead straight, which is much easier than trying to work out the exact angles. Anyway, so without further ado, let's cut to some pretty shots of me cutting out that resonator. Alright, so now that we've ground off this resonator, now you know what a resonator, well, this resonator looks like. We're just going to get the replacement piece of stainless steel that we're going to be cutting in. We have a meter. This is 46 centimeters long. We were just going to cut it in half, but we need to be able to get this flange, which is where this will then be attaching to the front half of the exhaust into the cats and stuff. So we need to get this on the end here, and it needs to be dead straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip this over the end and press it up against something level. And then we're just going to mark out that edge so we know what dead straight looks like. And then we can cut a bit off. So we're going to lose probably 2-3 centimeters in that process, so we need a little bit of slack, and in general we also want a little bit of slip in the end of each thing. So we thought about cutting in half, but that just wouldn't be enough spare metal for us, so we've just moved over a bit. So we're going to have an extra 3 centimeters on either side, so we can afford to lose a couple of centimeters on each end to both slip fitting and also to the cutting off of the end over here to make this flush. All right, I'm gonna grind away. I'll cut away. Just get this resonator out of the way so it doesn't screw things up for us. Always wear ear protection. All right, so we're done. There was a lot of grinding after a lot of tacking and then grinding and then tacking and then grinding. I think it looks absolutely excellent. It wasn't as hard as I thought. With welding with gas, it's a lot easier than you'd expect, and I think it has really come out quite well. I mean, look, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's going underneath the car and no one's ever going to see it, and it'll also just get covered in mud. So as long as the welds are penetrated, which you can see on this end, they definitely have. And this end, we had the settings a bit better as well, so it almost definitely is good on this end. I test fitted just this section when we had got this on, so I know that it will actually just slip fit and clip on like it's supposed to. Well, clamp on, sorry. So now I think what we should do, because we have all of the exhaust except for the cats off the car, I think it's mandatory that we give it a bit of a rev. That just sounds stupid. So the camera actually died while we were filming that time lapse of me getting the exhaust back up on the car. But it's sort of given me a really good opportunity in that I get to drive the car around for a couple of weeks with no resonator and really understand what it's like to live with. So it actually isn't as bad on the highway as I thought it might be. You know, I sort of thought, oh, low RPMs on the highway, it's just gonna drone away, and that was a real worry for me because I do a lot of highway driving. But in all honesty, turn the volume of your music up 1 or 2 or podcast or whatever, and you won't even notice. I mean, if you weren't listening to music, this car's got a wrecked door sill on the driver's door anyway, so you know, there's wind noise that's louder than well, not louder, but comparable. The only thing that I actually missed on recording the time lapse was that I accidentally put this exhaust tip on slightly wonky. Just one of the clamps I'd done up wasn't slightly even, so that was kind of 1 or 2 centimeters to I think it was the inside of the car, and it just looked a bit wonky. But I did that after work in the work car park in about 2 seconds. I didn't even have to jack up the car. You know, the clamp was just, it's about a foot in, and you just loosen it, wiggle it into position, and then you're good to go. Anyway, the upsides is that it sounds amazing. I mean, those low RPM moments are just fantastic. So you start it up and you idle it, you're letting it warm up for a minute in the morning, and it just sounds really wet, really kind of throaty and grunty like a V8 should. I'm really happy with it. If you give it a little bit of a tickle on the revs, it's got that crackly kind of, not like, you know, not Golf DSG spec, you know, crackle tune, but it's got a real kind of Jaguar-esque kind of growliness to it, which I'm really happy with. And then also it's got that kind of around town when you're ducking into a roundabout or something, in those kind of low RPM needing to quickly jump forward situations, it just sounds really meaty. Anyway, so look, I just have to say quickly, please like and subscribe, and also I do have a Patreon. I'll put a link in the description. Just go check that out if you're feeling like it. I mean, I don't make any money off this, but it'd be nice to be able to pay for some of the things like the camera equipment, or even to maybe help fund some of the modifications that I'm doing to the car or any cars I buy in future. So thank you to anyone that is already a patron. It means it's the only thing that makes me still want to do this. No, that's not true. I love doing it, but you know, it's a justifier to myself to be able to do it. So what I'll do is I'll throw up the sound of the stock exhaust and then see where it goes. Here that is.